Broad Universe is actually, it's just over 20 years old now. And it started specifically as a writers' organization for women writers in speculative fiction, which means sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and any of their subgenres. So I actually did, when I first started in romance, I wrote mermaid romances and stuff like that. So I dipped into the fantasy world via romance. Yeah, that was a little speculative because last time I checked, there weren't mermaids on the Jersey Shore, but I put one there. But I had gotten involved. I had met some people at a conference, and I loved the support. I loved this, the way they were there to encourage and, just really put the word out that, these writers were here and needed to be heard and seen and read. And it was a great supportive community. And then in the last few years, looking at all of the changes that have happened around gender and identity, we've broadened broad. It was really kind of funny. When we first talked about it, we're like, well, what about our name? And we're like, no, we're still broad, thanks.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 252 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Rona Gofstein, an Author Accelerator certified fiction book coach who specializes in helping writers of genre fiction develop, write, and revise their novels. She also writes contemporary romance, is the president of Broad Universe, an internationally recognized organization for women and alternatively gendered authors of speculative fiction, as well as president of the New Hampshire Chapter of RWA. Rona and I have a fantastic conversation, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. Hey, Mark, how's it going? Oh, not too bad, Mark. How are you doing? Well, I just wanted to ask you if you've heard about Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices? No, I haven't heard about Findaway Voices. What's Findaway Voices? Well, Mark, let me tell you. Findaway Voices is... Oh, no, wait. It's a platform, right? Yes, it's a platform. And it's a platform for... No. It's a platform for audio, the voice thing, right? Yeah, that's it exactly. It is a platform for audio book content for authors. And it allows authors to... Can they find a way to get their audiobooks produced? Yeah, it's like you've heard this before, Mark. Yeah, Findaway Voices allows you opportunities to find narrators through their marketplace that they just launched this year in 2022. Or you can get Findaway Voices to find you a narrator as well from a list of... Let me guess. Thousands of narrators around the world? Exactly, yeah, thousands of narrators around the world. But what if you already have your own audiobook files? Well, Mark, I'm glad you asked. If you have your own audiobook files, you can use Findaway Voices for distribution, right? You can use them for distribution. That's right, Mark. You can use them for distribution to get into more than 40 retail and library platforms. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad that you told me about Findaway Voices. Yeah, I'm glad I told you too. And are you, listener, glad that I don't just do the same sort of ad read over and over again, that I try something different? Well, if you want to try something different, if you want to try audiobooks, if you want to check it out, you should really check out Findaway Voices and all of the opportunities and choices that they have available. And you can check them out over at... No, wait, let me do this one. You can check them out over at Findaway Voices. No, wait, did I do it right? No, you kind of messed up there, Mark, because you're trying to do two voices at once and you're just screwing things up. Give me another chance, okay? All right, another chance. You can find out more about Findaway Voices at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. Yeah, so, I just thought I would do something a little bit different again for the Findaway Voices ad read. But I do enjoy using Findaway Voices, and I do recommend it as a platform. And I would not take a sponsor of this podcast that I did not believe in 100%. Speaking of believing in things 100%, I believe in the awesome patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. And I offer a huge apology to my patrons because in April and in May of 2022, I missed doing the monthly reflective hangout, reflective roundtable, the Patreon only hangout. And so I'm making it up to my awesome patrons. I am doing 3 virtual hangouts in June. And the hangouts are taking place on these particular days. So the hangouts are taking place on Friday, June 10, 2022 at 1 p.m. Eastern. Wednesday, June 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And Sunday, June 26th at 10 a.m. Eastern. So what I did is I picked, instead of just doing the one in June, I want to play catch up for the ones I missed in April and in May due to family things that were going on. I was a little bit distracted and a little bit sort of thrown left of center. Now, if you are a patron, I already sent this note out to patrons with the links in the show notes. So go over to patreon.com, check out your account, your messages, and you'll see in the posts there, of course, there'll be Zoom links for those meetings. And what these are is just a hangout. We're just going to hang out. You can ask me anything. Sometimes I pick different themes, or sometimes people will suggest things to talk about, and we talk about those things. And what I'll do is I'll make the playback available for all patrons for all 3 episodes as extra content, so you have that. But what I'm probably going to do is, because there's going to be 3 in 1, I'll maybe just do a highlights clip show for all of my listeners so they can benefit from some of the conversation that's happening. But this is really just meant to engage and network and interact with each other. I learn from my patrons. Hopefully my patrons learn from me. They learn from each other. They help each other. They support each other. It's really just meant to be part of the community. And I love the community that we have here, but I love the entire community, of course. This is just a special thank you for those who support the podcast over at patreon.com. And now for comments from recent episodes. Over on Twitter, Edwin Downward commented in response to discussion on a recent episode about writer's block. He said, interesting thoughts on writer's block. For me, I no longer use the term, preferring instead to call it my personal inertia on the grounds that any such block invariably impacts far more than my writing time. I love that, Edwin. You're calling it personal inertia. I love that way. I've actually jokingly said to some people, it's like, well, I don't believe in writer's block and it won't believe in me. But I love those thoughts. If you, dear listener, have any thoughts on writer's block or anything that we talk about on the show, please feel free. You can at me over at Twitter. I'm at Mark Leslie. You can also leave comments on any episode of the show over at starkreflections.ca. That's it for comments. I am going to pretty much skip the personal update at this point in time because I'm really just going to tell you the same old stuff, and I don't have that much new. The one new thing that I'm really excited about is it is June 2nd, 2022 as I'm recording this, and I'm actually quite relieved that I do not have to do any traveling for this month. I am doing multiple virtual events. I'm doing an in-store book signing on Saturday, June 18th, but I am not doing any travel where I have to get on a plane or even drive to, far. I do have to drive to Cambridge from Waterloo, Ontario, which is basically a 15-minute drive, so it's not a big deal. But I'm pretty relieved. I'm pretty excited. It almost feels like I can take a bit of a breather in June because I know it's going to be a crazy busy summer, and I do have work travel and personal travel coming up throughout the summer. It's going to be keeping me hopping, so I'm really, really just pleased that I can take a bit of a breather in June. How about you? How's your summer coming along? Hoping that you have an opportunity to take a breather too. Speaking of taking a breather, I'm going to go over to the pre-recorded podcast interview that Rona Gofstein and I did. Back in March was actually when we recorded this interview, and I know you're going to enjoy this interview. Now, Rona and I met in November of 2021 at the Liberty State Fiction Writers Conference. I sat in on one of the sessions that she taught about author branding, and I loved how she talked about combining the branding with things that you're really passionate about. Really resonated with me, and I thought, I need to talk more to this awesome woman. I need you, awesome listeners, to have an opportunity to hear her, and that's what's coming up right now in this wonderful interview with Rona Gofstein. Rona, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
I am so thrilled that we get a chance. Finally, I've been wanting to have this conversation with you since watching you in action all those many months ago, of course.
Many months ago, yeah.
So can you tell my listeners a little bit of a background in terms of how you got into writing in the first place?
It's one of those things where I almost don't remember where I didn't want to do it. I've always loved it. I must have started playing around with it when I was in college, because I can remember friends there saying things to me like, this conversation is not going to wind up in a book, is it? I'm pretty sure I never gave them a definitive answer on any of that. But at the time it was the late 80s, and I was, doing the responsible thing and, looking for a job, not becoming a writer. And later on, I realized that actually might have been more responsible, but regardless, I started writing seriously after my older son was born. I had found, I don't even remember how, the Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. And it really just prompted me to get back to all of those half-started manuscripts and the ones that weren't finished and the ideas that had been swirling around, and finally finish something and polish it and do what was really necessary to submit it finally. So it took a while. I don't know if any, I know very few writers who have a very nice straight route. Oh yes, I decided to write a book. I finished the book. I submitted the book, and I got the book published. So no, long, winding yellow brick road.
You got to have some try-fails. You got to have a good story arc, right?
I was about to say it's all food for the internal character development.
How did you decide which of those unfinished projects that you picked up? Was there a process, or did you just kind of rifle through the folder?
There was the one I picked up. It was the heroine. It was seeing. There was. Suppose there's no accident. There was a place where I could see where her confidence needed to grow and what she could gain, in addition to the love interest, obviously, because I write romance. And I wanted to give her story. Hers was the one that really, her arc was the one that really hit me. And it was the first time I was able to actually, and I think it was because I started with knowing what I wanted her change to be, that I was able to actually finish it, as opposed to writing a whole bunch of scenes that were all really nice, but didn't actually create a story. The idea of having a lot of scenarios, but not a full novel. So
that's how you got back into it, was going back and then finding this growth in a character, etc. What did you develop a particular process from that point on, or was it just an additional sort of feel your way through?
No, I'm a feel your way through kind of person. I keep hoping one of these times I will hit on the process that I can repeat over and over. It's sort of like the way I believe somewhere there's a planner out there that will keep me organized. Haven't found that yet.
Haven't met it yet?
No, but don't tell me it doesn't exist. I refuse to believe that. I just haven't found it. So yeah, I think it's always character for me, though. I think the even when I do start with a scene, whether sometimes it's an opening scene or a closing scene, or maybe it's even something in the middle, it doesn't have any momentum until I know my characters and their backstory, sort of that misbelief and lie that I know that they grow through, that they'll have what they want, plus love. So I'm kind of I don't even remember how long ago it was, but I found Deborah Dixon's Goal Motivation Conflict book. And that really just helped me to understand what it was I was looking at in my characters. What is I liked about developing characters? And even if I do write a few scenes and don't plot, because I'm somewhere in between that, I'm like that planstser thing, sometimes somewhere between planning and plotting, but flying by the seat of my pantsing. I always tend to know my characters pretty well, regardless of what I'm necessarily going to specifically put them through.
Does that mean you know them before you start the scene or story,
Yeah.
or do they get developed as you're writing? No, so you
Mostly,
know.
I know them. I know them mostly before I start. Before I write them. I'm not a total discovery writer in the sense that there are writers who will just start with a character and see where it goes. Yeah. I like knowing who they were before this story started, what got them to this point, and why now. Why am I going to tell their story now?
So do you have a character sheet or sketch sheet or something that you kind of map out?
I have several that I use. I have a character sketch sheet, and then after I'm done writing, I have sort of a scene sketch sheet to make sure that the scenes are doing what they need to do. But yeah, I start with the GMC character sketch. So that's sort of my first thing. That's a big thing on my thing. And then I also sort of on that same sheet have, what's their lesson to learn, what's at stake for them, what's their lie or biggest fear, and frequently what's their never ever, what would they never ever do, because it's amazing how many times you're gonna have to make them do that. And also if I'm stuck sometimes, I don't know what scene or what the scene needs, if I think about, well, what would they never do and how can I make them have to do it?
Oh, I love that. What a great thing to think about for a character. Do you how do you get to know the characters? Do you have conversations with them? Do you take them out on a date? Do you go for a walk with them, or like?
And they never pay.
Yeah, I know. You're always the one picking up the bill.
Every time. It varies. I'm one of those people who they kind of sit in that back burner place in your brain and they kind of percolate. I do sort of the character interviewing things on the page sometimes. I'll just start with a question as if they are sitting with me, and ask questions and see what flies out of my fingers. That's the point, where some writers do their discovery as they are writing. This is where my discovery part comes in. Okay. Is sitting there with them and saying, so about your mother.
It's Barbara Walters kind of interview, right?
It's a very Barbara Walters. If I can make them cry, so much the better, right?
Yeah, exactly. So wait, so you write contemporary romance.
I do.
But you are president of Broad Universe, and that is speculative literature. Could you explain what Broad Universe is and your role?
Sure. Broad Universe is actually, it's just over 20 years old now. It started specifically as a writers' organization for women writers in speculative fiction, which means sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and any of their subgenres. So I actually did, when I first started in romance, I wrote mermaid romances and stuff like that. So I dipped into the fantasy world of romance.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that was a little speculative because last time I checked, there weren't mermaids on the Jersey Shore, but I put one there. She liked skee-ball. But I had gotten involved. I had met some people at a conference, and I loved the support. I loved this the way they were there to encourage and just really put the word out that these writers were here and needed to be heard and seen and read. And it was a great supportive community. And then in the last few years, looking at all of the changes that have happened around gender and identity, we've broadened broad. It was really kind of funny. When we first talked about it, we're like, well, what about our name? And we're like, no, we're still broad. Thanks.
Did it play on words for women initially, and then it became
initially it was, and then it just became the broader universe of women
that.
And alternatively gendered authors in, so that we're giving a voice to those who are not getting the same voice and the same publicity and all of that stuff. So we do classes, and we are at conferences, and we do rapid fire readings. We're at NorwestCon this coming weekend.
Really?
So all around the country, different conferences will do tables and have our authors signing books. They'll be on panels. And then, as I said, we have something we call a rapid fire reading, which is anywhere from 5 to 10 writers reading for no more than about 5 minutes each, just to give you a little taste.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Who they are and what they write.
That's fantastic. And you'll send me the URL for Broad Universe. So
Absolutely. Especially since we just did a whole bunch of work to update our website. It's very fancy now.
Oh, fantastic. Because that is an issue in the speculative science fiction fantasy communities, is that openness. Ironically, that open-mindedness in the speculative, you would think in speculative fiction there'd be a lot more open minds, but there's far more open minds in romance from my experience.
It's funny, we a couple of months ago, and I remember posting on the BU Facebook page going, this is why we need to be there. The New York Times Review of Books posted, I think, Jules Verne and so as the fathers of speculative fiction and sci-fi. And somebody posted, Mary Shelley did not spend a weekend going through that.
Inventing science fiction horror. Yeah, exactly.
It's actually, yes, Frankenstein is considered by most to be the first speculative fiction / horror. So she is our matron saint.
Oh my God, that's right. I think I remember seeing that post. It was like, really?
Really? Come on, New York Times. You can't do a little fact checking for us here.
Oh, that's obviously much needed. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, still needed. It was an interesting reminder. Like, work is not done.
Something else that's much needed. Tell me a little bit about the Author Accelerator. You're accredited coach. What is the role?
I'm an accredited book coach. Yeah, Jenny Nash founded an organization called Author Accelerator. She had been coaching books for quite a while, and she saw this growing need. You know, writers often hear the stories of those wonderful editors of bygone eras who helped, Hemingway and Fitzgerald, they all but held their hands and, and coached them through. Yeah. There are files and records of what some of these literary classics look like when they actually landed on the editor's desk. Well, it's really not an option for how many publishers are left now? 4 or 5? What week is it? By next week, it'll be fewer. There really isn't that way to help an author craft fiction. And it is so much different a process than what anybody learns in a college class or even in an MFA program. And Jenny had seen that over and over. And so she created a program and after we go through, well, for me, it took about 7 months because I was writing and going through the modules and stuff. And you go through the course, you do 3 practicums. It's then submitted to a committee that makes sure you're kind of learning and doing and supporting these writers to take their next steps and be more successful. So it's everything from something it's called the blueprint for a book, which helps a writer create a really strong foundation so that their first draft is stronger than most writers, regardless of whether or not they plot or pants, however they choose to write it. It's also a process of knowing how to help an author revise. We're taught and given skills and techniques to help an author really revise a novel, looking at a hierarchy of needs so that you don't start changing commas and pyramids before you've really made sure that the narrative arc is on the page and that things are where they need to be, because that's later. Get those basics, get those foundational things done first. And then we're also there's also training on how to write query letters, write a strong synopsis, and search for the agents who are going to go, yes, this is what I want because this is what I represent. And we coach, some of the Author Accelerator coaches coach your authors through that part of the process. I love the beginning. I love helping a writer who just has that dream. Oh wow, you really did have a book in you, Sam. Yeah, they've always known. They've never given it up. I love working with those writers to get that book out of their heads and onto the page. It's such an incredible process.
So yeah, I was going to ask about that. What is it about that process? Because that is magical, especially if it's the first time they've done it and you've really helped them discover the power of that of that moment. Are those the kinds of clients you like to have, or what are the other kinds of things you really?
I love that. I've worked mostly right now with people who are trying to get that first book written, and then I had the flip side also with some clients recently who had the book done. I would say it was probably around a second draft, and it wasn't quite there yet, and they knew it. And so they looked to me to do, as I said, what we call a deep revision, right. Sometimes called a developmental edit, where you really look at the story structure. So when it comes to the new writers, the the service I do, I refer to it, and Author Accelerator has the version 2, although I've expanded on it because of the things I've learned as a writer, called the blueprint for a book. And what it does is it not only has you think about who your character is, and I do go through the goal, motivation, conflict exercise with them, but also what's the point your story is trying to tell, because that's going to carry all the way through. So when you don't know what, your sagging middle needs, I get to say to them, well, look back to that point.
Right.
Look back to what you wanted the story to tell. We asked them early on to think about what their title is and what their genre is and what the book jacket would be, because you want the book to get out of their heads and into the world. And so to start the process of envisioning that, having them start to see where it would be on the shelf, and who would you send it to have them say, oh, this is great, it's just like what I love to read. And then I think one of the most incredible pieces, we have 2 pieces that I really love. One is sort of this, using almost a Pixar version of developing a story. You go through a process of saying, once upon a time there was, and every day they, until one day, and then you kind of go through, and because of that, until, it's usually got a bunch of steps. So now you've got kind of that general, all right, I know kind of where this is going to move.
Right.
And then we take it a step further to a process called the inside outline, which is really where some of the magic happens, because what a lot of writers do is they have all these scenes. And so what you have is, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But a reader goes through a book for how those happenings are changing the character.
Right.
So it's not just that Katniss has to fight in the Hunger Games. It's how she changes, and how each thing that happens, how who she is affects the choices she makes in one scene, and how that scene changes her and then changes how she responds in the next one and the one after that, and so on. And so we work with our authors, I work with my writers to get that emotional concept, that point, that where is their lie, their misbelief, their internal goal? Where is that being hit in this scene? So that when they write, it's not just what's happening, it's what's happening. It's that it's that emotion of what's truly happening that gets on the page early. Because when you get about 40 or 50,000 words into a novel and you realize, wait, what? Why am I writing this? How were they supposed to? And what were they gonna? Wait, what was this process saves you from at least that part of the hair pulling. There's always other hair pulling, but as any writer will tell you, as it doesn't seem to matter. There's always a point where you're like, oh God, what have I done? Or you write this beautiful inside outline and the character goes, no.
I'd never do that.
I'd never do that. That's my never ever. I didn't tell you that. But what's great is you have places to go back to now. That's what I found. When I've used it myself, what's been really fun is to realize that, okay, so this went this way, but I know this. So I can bring it back in, which is great.
So do you work with clients who are preparing to pitch to an agent or editor? Do you also work with self-published clients? How does that work?
I do. I work with both. My work has been previously with small press, and later this year when I launched my new series, it's going to be self-published. So I'm moving to that. But yeah, I have helped. I just actually found out a client today, a story we worked on together. Her agent pitched it to Hallmark and she got asked for a full manuscript for it. So I'm very excited. These are the moments that we all just, we can't wait to hear those moments. So I have been there with them on, I didn't do she already had the agent, but helping her to get ready to pitch to that. There's so much of this process that we can't control. Not only sometimes, what our daily word count is, but you certainly can't control agent responses and publisher responses and all of that. And I think one of the great things about being a coach is being able to be there for somebody, being in their corner through this roller coaster, being able to have that sort of distant view, because I know having, being the writer and having a view of about there right in front of my face is really hard. So getting to be there for writers at a distance and being able to see, no, you've really made progress. No, this is really moving the way it should. has been just a blast. It's been a gift to be able to do that with writers.
Wow. So do you have, so you work with a lot of beginning writers trying to get the book out of them and help them with the techniques to.
Yeah. And sometimes even not so beginning writers who have gotten to a book that just doesn't seem to want to.
Oh yeah. Like how do we, like there's something here. Can we find it together? Right?
I can't seem to find it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird for anybody who's listening, who has, who's a parent and has more than one child, you have one child, you're like, oh, I know what to do. And the second child comes along and goes, no, you don't.
Exactly.
And I find that that's sometimes true with writing a book too. It's like, I've written a book. I know how to plot. I know how to develop a character, so I can do it the same way again. And the book goes, no. It develops differently. And I can take apart a book and I can show you where it's not working and I can help you to do this thing. I can't tell you why it's never the same from one process to the next. Maybe it's as simple as the characters are different. And so they demand different things of us as the writer. Right. But although I do have some things that repeat, like knowing my goal motivation in advance and, having an idea of what my point is and why I want to write this book. Sometimes the process itself is just like, oh, it's all new again. Why is it all new again?
I guess I was wondering if you're working with somebody who's maybe not written a book before, that once you help them with that, is there a next level where they go, okay, great, now what? Okay.
Oh yeah,
you helped me with the book. I've got the book now. Now what do I do?
You do. At this point, I've done it with separate writers. I have one writer who is in the drafting process, who I expect I will be with her through the first draft and then through the revision process and probably through the submission process. So I will get back to you on what that takes with just one writer. But yeah, you as coaches, we can be with them for any and all stages of the process, which is kind of neat. We can be there. I know of writers, and this hasn't been with me, but they wrote a first draft with a coach and then wanted to do the next steps on their own and maybe come back later. And then of course, there are people who come to us when they're already they've kind of made a mess of things and they need it. Okay, where is it? I know there's a story in here somewhere.
If there's writers out there that have never worked with a coach and they're wondering if they should work with a coach, is there sort of a series of questions or things they should consider before they realize they're ready to take that step?
That's a really good question, actually. And there's lots of different reasons to work with coaches, and as there are many different coaches. I think it's that feeling of, oh God, how do I want to describe this? There's this point where you need some support, and you're not necessarily getting it from a spouse who is cheering you on, but may not get this writer thing. And you may have found a writer's group, but there's frequently a competitiveness there sometimes, and it's hard to know if you're frequently getting their input, but not necessarily the skill or the support that where meeting it where you really are. So I think that's what it is if there's a point where you're stuck, you're not feeling you're getting the book down, or the draft isn't, you've got the feeling the draft isn't coming together and the support you're getting on it isn't really moving it forward. It feels like a lot of opinions. As a coach, I'm there to meet you where you are, and then see what's working or not working in the manuscript and work with you to make it your book, because it's always your book. Right. Even whether I'm editing, whether I'm whatever input I'm giving, it's always the author's book and going back to their vision and their point and their reason for writing it. But yeah, the writers I've worked with, I think they all have that feeling of, I'm floundering. I don't know where to turn. And fortunately, myself and other coaches, we also do we do discovery calls. I will get on a phone call with you for half an hour to 45 minutes. You will not only see what coaching is like, but before we get off, my guess is you'll even have an actionable step you can take. That's sort of what I like to do, is to make sure that whenever I meet somebody, regardless of whether or not they're going to work with me, they leave that call knowing, all right, I got something I can try, do next, try next, change next, place to go.
Awesome. So where in this work that you do, where do you fit in your writing?
First thing in the morning. I'm a morning person. I have some friends, we joke that if we ever go on a writing retreat, we're never going to see each other, because we'll see each other in the afternoon, because, and maybe dinner, because I'm going to bed early and they're writing until 2 and 3 in the morning. But I'm a first thing in the morning girl. I still do morning pages. I went back to those several years ago
Sounds like a
from the
Julia
Artist's
Cameron
Way.
thing.
I'm sorry.
Sounds like a Julia Cameron thing.
It
Isn't
is.
Yeah.
It is. That's the Julia Cameron thing. 3 pages, handwritten, just sort of fall onto the page. And some days it's just like, oh, yesterday was awful. Why am I awake? There's not enough coffee in the world. And other days it's okay. Today I'm going to be working on this. And I'll say, okay, when I last left my heroine, this is where she was, and this is the scene I'm working on. And I'll start to sort of percolate out what needs to be in that scene that might not be there yet, or what do I hope, where I want the character to be by the end. So that by the time afterwards that I get to the manuscript, a friend of mine calls it writing about the writing. And it's like, it's sort of her visual on it was the way a parent holds a 2-wheeler when a child's learning to ride a bike, and you hold on to the back until the child's kind of balanced, and then you let it go. That's kind of how the morning pages feel for me. They're my parent holding on, and then by the time I get to the pages, I'm kind of ready to let go. And
I love that.
It can write.
Is that's your warm up, and then you get into the writing?
And then I get into the actual, yeah. As I said, some days it's just whining. I admit it. I'm sorry, folks. They're not these big dramatic things, and I probably should keep them in a box that says "burn" when I die. So sometimes they're just all the worries and the noise that gets into our heads, that real world noise that we don't really want in our books. For me, it's very helpful to just kind of leave that on the page of the journal, and then when I come to the manuscript, my head can be there and with those characters. And my goal most days is to be there from about 8:30 to about 12:30.
Oh, so that you actually, or morning is all morning.
Morning is my time.
Until the noon hour, not like before breakfast kind of thing.
No. I'm usually at the morning pages by around 7:30ish.
Okay.
And then I'm at the manuscript by about 8:30ish.
Wow, that's awesome. And then you do your admin stuff, and
I do. And then I'm writing. There are days when life appointments, obviously things happen before 12:30, but that's my most creative time. And then in the afternoons and sometimes early evening, that tends to be when I do the other work. So it's sometimes the business of writing, the social media, the blogging, and pieces of that. But it's also when I get to do my coaching time. So I transition at that point, sort of I have lunch, and if it's nice up here in New England, get outside. We're in the middle of second winter because we've already had false spring.
Of course.
But and then in the afternoon I get to focus. I make that shift, and then I focus on my writers, and then I get to put my creativity towards them and see their work. It's nice for me. I know coaches who are also writers who sometimes they need full days in either direction. They need the full day for coaching or the full day for writing. I actually kind of find they feed off of each other really nicely. If I've had a frustrating day on my own pages, sometimes being with my clients' work is like, oh yes, this is why we do this. I love this character. I can't wait to tell her. I can't wait to show him, and that stuff. And then when I've had a good day, I get to bring that. Like, yeah, they get to do this too. So I love it. I feel really fortunate to have found the program and the work. It's been a blast.
Well, I love that you can play in the different parts of your brain, and it's all creative, and it's all fun, and it's all story and character and setting and all of those elements that make the magic.
Yeah, and I love story. There's I don't know if you're familiar with Lisa Cron's book Wired for Story, but we really are, it's how we remember things. It's how we internalize things, how we process things. If anybody goes to my website, they'll see it's all about the Wizard of Oz, which to me is it's an incredible story. And the lessons in there, I've internalized in ways that I never would have if it had been written in some sort of nonfiction book that said, This is how you follow your own yellow brick road, which someday I may write. But it's better told through this woman who meets her head and her heart and her courage rather than,
Fair enough. Yeah.
I think in the self-help section, there's something about having those stories told to us, and whether it's the Hunger Games or any of the Court of Thorn and Roses, these characters that have just jumped out at people, that hold people. Colleen Hoover's work and even Stephen King's work. I mean, my God, talk about characters who live with you forever. And I think that's what a lot of my writers. I think if I had to It's funny. I'm realizing this as these words are coming out of my mouth. If I had to tell you what my writers have in common, it might be genre, because I do tend towards the genres I'm most familiar with, which is romance, women's fiction, and even some light fantasy. But really where they're all similar is these incredible characters that I can't wait for these readers to meet someday. I love who these writers are writing about. I love them telling me how you wouldn't believe what happened to them, and then this happened, and now they're gonna have to go through this. And I'm like, this is the juicy stuff.
I love that.
So I think that's what attracts me to a writer. But that might, I don't know if I was aware of it before, but it's their excitement and this character or characters that they want to bring alive.
Wow. So when you think about the work you've done as a coach and in the community, in the writing community, helping writers who maybe haven't been given as many opportunities to take their voices out there, what are the things that you've benefited from as a writer yourself from doing this extracurricular support work?
So send me the question again. How have I?
So how is your work as a coach and just working in the writing community, how has that come back to assist your own personal writing?
Well, it's funny. Someone's like, well, if you can't teach, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually the opposite. If you care, if it matters to you, I think, teach it, because not only will you then have others who understand it better and can use it, but you do too. Every time I've stepped out to talk about the inside outline, or when you and I met, I was discussing coming from, how to develop your author platform from who you are. And again, that's about character, because let's face it, I'm a lot of characters. You all are, thank goodness. I hardly have to make anything up. I mean, really. I'm enough different people in here. I'm good. But I think this has given me, it's sort of given me a double opportunity. It reminds me why what we do is important, how it makes a difference. We just went through a pandemic, and there are people who will say, romance is not important, or this is not important. I'm like, oh, yes, it is. Oh, it's so important. It's how we make sense of the world. It's how we get through. It's how we hope. It's how we change. It's how we. Joan Didion, I think, said, I don't know what I think until I write it down, or I don't know what I feel until I write it down. And sometimes you know exactly what she means. It's like, it's in here. And until it's on the page, I'm like, not quite sure about that yet. So working with writers, I think it's helped me understand how much it's given me a different appreciation, I think, for what I do. I've always loved writing. I mean, I've loved writing. I don't do it because I hate, okay, there are days when I hate it, I admit. But but it reminds me of why I love it and the excitement of it. And the other piece that is just a side benefit to me, I'm in one stage of the book right now. At the book I'm writing, I'm in basically the deep second draft revision. This isn't the cute editing. This is that stuff I was talking to you before. We have to go underneath and go, whoops, that's not there, and kind of really digging down. But I have writers at other stages. And so while I'm mired in this stage, which can feel slow and a little molasses moving, I can be with them in some of the more quote unquote fun stages. And it's a reminder that I will get there too, or I will come back to a beginning stage. And that's nice. Just a reminder that, where you are in the process is only for now, and the next stage is coming, and then the one after that, and it's all a part of it. So that's been a real benefit. And then be able to tell writers, who have the revisions coming, no, I get it. You're not going to love it. You're not going to love me probably during part of that time. But here's what's on the other side of that.
So sort of final question. It kind of relates back to that topic that I got a chance to see you present on, which was the author brand and social media and your web presence, etc. But I want to tie that topic back to somebody's writing itself. So there's an authentic, even if it's a manufactured presence, but it's based on something that's real and based on who this person is. Does the same thing apply to the writing?
It does. It's interesting. I think no matter what genre you write, the story you choose to tell comes back to something that's authentically true for you. You can write a romance that is about someone's search for self-worth in addition to the love story. But in many ways, Dune is a young man's search for self-worth as he takes on this kingdom and these two people. His father tries to tell him, no matter what kind of leader you become, you never have to be more than my son, who I love, which is just the greatest thing in the world. We want all parents to say that. But it's still that story. It's a story of a young man finding out who he is. The who he is in a very big world. That's no matter whether you've seen it on the screen or on the page. But the core story, what's at its heart is still that. We're back to that universal resonance. And so I think when an author wants to step out into the into social media or onto their web presence, it's going to come from that too, that place of, this is where I want to connect with you. This is when an author stops and thinks, well, what kind of people do I want to hang around with? What kind of readers do I want to meet? What kind of readers do I want to come invite into my books? Who are the readers who are, I always think of the ideal reader as the reader most likely to take the emotional journey you want them to take, the journey you wrote this book for. And then what connects you as the writer to those people? It's something genuine, as simple as, my ideal reader is also going to be addicted to their morning coffee. We'll have that in common. We may have a love of the Wizard of Oz in common. These are the things I put out there. And, if I reached 10% of all the Wizard of Oz lovers out there, and only a percentage of them read my genre, that's still an incredible connection, an amazing community, and a lot of readers. So taking what we love, what's authentic and comfortable, because there are some things, we don't want to put out. It's okay. You can live some of your life behind closed doors, I think. I'm not positive. I sometimes wonder these days. There's those memes that say, thank God I grew up when I did, when not everything I did was plastered all over the internet. I am kind of glad for that. But yeah, the same way you build your book from this important why and this reason of why is this book important for you to write, you can go to your author platform, to your brand, and go, who am I sharing with these people? And you're not going to be creating, you might actually create some lifelong friendships, but the connection, that emotional bridge between you and them, because that's what brings readers back, that emotional bridge, that emotional experience they had with your book, and hopefully an emotional experience that they then get to share with you. It's all emotion.
It is. It really is. Rona, I knew we were going to have a fantastic conversation, and thank you so much. That was amazing. I know my listeners are probably going to want to go and check out your website. Can you let us know where people can find you online?
I will. It's pretty easy. It's ronagofstein.com. I know I kind of hoped one day to have an easy to spell last name, but no, but we'll have it in the show notes. It's kind of how it sounds. Rona is R-O-N-A. There's not a lot of us out there. You can find Broad Universe. We'll give you the link for that. It's an incredible organization. We'd love to have you. But thank you. It was great to be here. And I hope we do get to hear from some of your listeners, because there are stories out there that need to be told and readers who are dying to read them.
Awesome. A great way to end this. Thanks again, Rona.
You're welcome.
So before I get into the reflection of based on the interview, I realize I had incorrectly stated something. I call it a verbal typo. I mentioned that I had spoken to Rona. I'd interviewed her back in March. It's not true. I'd interviewed her in April because, January, February, March, April. I use my little fingers to count. The fourth month is April. And as I was listening to the interview, of course, it was the echo from my mom's kitchen up at her home, my home now in Northern Ontario. And that's when I realized, no, I was not in my regular studio. I was in an echoey kitchen, and I apologize for getting that wrong in the pre-interview notes, but also for the reduced sound quality on my end. Rona sounded perfectly fine, but I was in a sort of a limited environment for that. So that's just a little bit of an apology and a correction because I hate when I later hear my verbal typos and I should really go back and fix it, but I just want to move forward with this, and I think you'll forgive me, won't you? Won't you forgive me? But I do want to reflect on something Rona said, and she talked a little bit about how this is from Julia Cameron, the Artist's Way, and you know what? I sold hundreds of copies of this book when I worked in bookstores. I've handled it, I've shelved it, I've displayed it, I've recommended it to people. I have never actually read The Artist's Way, so I'm going to put that on my reading list. I'm listening to a book from a recommendation from Scott, who is on from a couple episodes back, and it was the book about nature and sort of communing with nature, and it's one of the books from the author he recommended, and I'm probably going to read more than one of them because I'm really enjoying that. But I've never read The Artist's Way, and I really think I should get to these modern classics that people have recommended to me. But from The Artist's Way, Rona was talking about how the morning pages that she does every morning, they can be a great warm-up exercise before the real writing for the day starts. And it reminded me, no, I'd never done morning pages, but I used to do writing warm-up exercises, particularly when I was getting started. I remember when I was commuting into Toronto on the GO train, and from Hamilton to Toronto, and I used to warm up by writing a blog post that I would write on my laptop, and then when I got into work, I would just spend 5 minutes and post it to my blog because there was no internet on the train back then. And that helped me because the blog post sort of got me. I was like thinking about, I guess it was morning pages when you think about it, because it was just like a journal. It was my online journal, which is what the blog was. But I would sometimes do writing warm-up exercises, which would be parody lyrics. And I know I've talked about that before on the podcast, but sometimes just doing that writing exercise of the parody lyrics was great because it kind of used different parts of my brain. It was different kind of writing, and it challenged me in new ways. But it greased the wheels of my imagination. It greased the wheels of getting writing done, because the act of writing begets more writing, and I love that. So when Rona talked about the morning pages, they're great warm-up exercises. So they could be good for the soul, but they're also good for the writing and for the practice, and even doing a different kind of writing as well. Just getting the mind going and working. So it's like stretching before you go for a run as well. So I wanted to ask you, dear listener, are there things that you do to prepare for the writing session? It doesn't have to be a morning writing session, but before a writing session, are there certain things that you have to do, like rituals? For example, I do my writing in the morning, and so I will put coffee on, and that's kind of how I get into the writing. I also do a few things where I try really hard not to, especially on days where I'm really focused on this is going to be a very clear writing time. I do not look at email. I do not look at any of the admin stuff. I try to get those words out first, because the minute I let my brain go into looking at the calendar and looking at all the other things, I get distracted. I miss things. I'm not focused on what I need to be focused on. When I write in the evening, I will tend to, even though I'm a huge beer drinker, and I am a huge beer drinker lately, and my beer gut is rather large lately, but I'm a drinker of many beers. I enjoy beers a lot, but when I write in the evening, I tend to go for scotch. I tend to go for something that I'm going to sip. It's going to be nice and slow. So I'm just curious what your morning page ritual may be, wherever and whenever that happens. How do you warm up into writing? And of course, you can leave those comments over at starkreflections.ca for this episode 252. But that's it for the reflection. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you want to support this podcast, you can leave a review for it on the podcatcher of your choice. But you can also share this podcast with a friend that you think would find value in these stark reflections. And so, until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.